Welcome back to Switch to Linux. Today on DistroWars, we're going to have a look at ArcoLinux versus EndeavourOS, two Arch installers with two completely different purposes. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you what the installation process is going to look like, but we're not actually going to install for the interest of time. I have an ArcoLinux and an EndeavourOS built up already. We're going to show you those look like after we have walked through the websites and the basic setup information. So first, let's go ahead and have a look at each of their websites. So ArcoLinux specifically is an Arch Linux installer of various levels, and their ultimate goal is to teach you how to install Arch, use and manage and maintain Linux, which is an amazing and lofty goal. And they have a series of distributions. They'll have the B, they'll have the D. And these are just different types of builds, different systems already built out inside of it. And the goal is to walk you through step for step how you're going to set everything up and basically going to teach you all of the options. So you can see here we have 4 options on their site. To use the ArcoLinux D ISO to choose the desktop in Calamaris. Option 2, ArcoLinux D ISO, install the desktop using various scripts that you can get from GitHub. Or you can do the ArcoLinux B, and this is going to allow you to do a lot more customization, or install the desktop using the tweak tool. So there are a lot of options in here. Now, my biggest criticism of ArcoLinux is they have a lot of information, and some of it's spread across a couple of different websites, and it's so easy to get lost, and I've actually found some of the documentation is not particularly complete. And that is kind of problematic because when you are using, for example, ArcoLinux D, and I wanted to set both of these up using the Budgie desktop, and when you install your system, it does not actually install a window manager at the end. And so you install it, but it never configures it. So whatever window manager you installed in your setup process, you have to manually configure this in the final step. It's like everything else you're running scripts for, why not run a script for that? So once you get into it the first time, you're going to boot into a login prompt. You're going to have to log in with the user you created, sudo system control enable, and then your manager, whether you're doing light DM or GDM, or there's 4 of them you can pick from. You just need to enable that, and then it works just fine. It's just there's that one missing step, and I can't find the documentation on it anywhere. Even today, going back, I forgot exactly which step it was. I had to go back into my old videos about how to install ArcoLinux to remember how to do that. That's kind of problematic. Nevertheless, they do have a lot of information. They do a lofty goal of helping you learn how to install Linux. And for that, it is certainly to be praised. And also, if you're going to want an easy to install Arch that you have full control over the system, ArcoLinux is definitely the best option. You can choose whether it's going to install SSH or print services or network services or anything like this, or you can take them off, you can turn them on, whatever it happens to be. Now, the second one is EndeavourOS. This is for a person who wants to have an easy to run and manage Arch system without having to do a lot of crazy steps. This is for the person that needs to run Linux. They need to run a bleeding edge Linux, but they're not the least bit interested in all of the ins and outs of learning how to get everything to work and learning how to manage everything from the outset. And there's valid arguments for both of those people. Obviously, if you got the time, definitely going through ArcoLinux and learning all about the Arch Linux install is definitely a very good and very recommended option. But for those of you that are like, okay, I need to run an Arch-based Linux, and I need to get it up and running quickly, Endeavour is going to be your choice. Of all of the Arch installers, we've looked at Arco, we've looked at Endeavour, I've looked at Arch Labs. I thought there was another one we looked at as well. Endeavour is hands down the easiest one to do. You don't have quite as much customization, although you can choose your desktop environment on the installation process. So with that, let's go ahead and walk through what the installers are going to look like. And we're going to go ahead and boot this guy up looking at ArcoLinux. We'll do ArcoLinux first. So let's boot into ArcoLinux and see what that's going to look like. All right, so here we are. As soon as you boot up as soon as you go ahead and boot up your ArcoLinux in either in your machine, or in this case, we're using a virtual machine, You boot right on into this screen here. We can run gparted. You can update the Arch Linux mirrors. You can run Calamares. Now, you will want to update the Arch Linux mirrors if you are installing this on a system. I did that this morning when I built the system. I'm going to show you guys what it is. For the purpose of brevity here, we're going to skip that step and just go right on into run Calamares. You do not need to run gparted unless you are specifically doing something very custom. Now you can see here on Calamares, you can see the wide variety of things we're going to be doing here, and that is what you're going to have to walk through here. So over here, you have AMD Ucode, Intel Ucode, CUDA Toolkit, NVIDIA's. You have Zen Linux kernel without NVIDIA, Linux hardened without NVIDIA, LTS kernel without NVIDIA, or Linux kernel without NVIDIA. So choose which Linux kernel you would like to use. All right, and then you need to enable, do you want to set up and support and enable Bluetooth support, laptop support, which is going to give you TLP. So for you guys wanting that, so here's your Bluetooth features as well. You have network discovery, so you have a variety of networking tools. Let's go ahead and set that. Printing support. So if you want to run a printer, go ahead and do that. If printing is not something you do for your computer, you can skip it and save yourself some room. Here's Samba, and of course, some sound. Oh, Pulse Audio. Do we have to? All right, so let's go ahead and do that. All right, so now you can choose your login manager. All right, so I did say window manager earlier, didn't I? Login manager. So here we have LightDM, SDDM, GDM, LXDM, whichever one. I personally prefer LightDM. I haven't had any issues with anything else. Many of them like GNOME, GNOME DM, which I think is kind of ugly, but I like LightDM. We'll just go ahead and go with that. So here is, you have a variety of desktop environments to choose from. Like I said, our build here runs Budgie. You can go down and see what it's going to install. You can see Budgie comes with GNOME as a dependency, and so you are getting that as well. They do have a variety of other options here as well. So pretty much any desktop that you want. You do have deepen options as well. A few other items there as well. All right, communication software. So these are kind of your more trendy, more normie type communication tools. We have Zoom, Skype, we have Slack, Riot, Discord, TeamViewer. We'll just go ahead and skip those. Development tools, pick your development tools. Let's go ahead and go with LeafPad. Make sure you have a good text editor there. And then here is, you can choose your various Office tools, AbiWord, Calibri. There's Focusrite. Here's LibreOffice. Of course, you can do Still or Fresh. Still is more for the business end, that it's not going to roll as much. Fresh, you're going to have a lot more of your newer options. And then down here under your multimedia, you have a variety of different things. So you have OBS, LMMS with Rhythmbox, Spotify, VLC. Just kind of pick the things that you might want to run. Let's do that, and we'll go with Lollipop. Why not? As far as internet, we have Brave, we have Chromium, we have Dropbox, Evolution, FileZilla, Firefox. We have a Firefox and an AdBlock Plus. We have a Nextcloud client. We have Thunderbird, Tor browser launcher. So many different options here. We'll just go with our Firefox and my Chromium, other ones I usually run. Here's a variety of theming options if you want to change around theming. And then graphics. One of the things that's curious to me is they don't have GIMP on the graphics. And I didn't see it in the list. I'm kind of looking for it now because I didn't see it earlier, but oh well. Here's games. You can choose whatever games you want. Any terminals, we'll go with console. And file managers. I hate files that comes with Budgie, so we'll go with Nemo. It still will use files, but I can change it over to Nemo if I want. And over here, we have a variety of different tools. Hey, look at that. Google Earth Pro, YouTube DL. We have Sigil, Putty, BleachBit, just a variety of tools. And then under our accessories, we have fonts. You might want to do a lot of fonts, particularly if you're doing graphics type stuff. There's Arco Meta Fun, password managers. We have KeePass XC on there. We have a Bitwarden on there. Tor browsers, Tor, PrivacyOx. Just a lot of different options that we have. So you can kind of see that with ArcoLinux, you have a variety of different tools. Over here, we have Discord, simple screen recorder, Thunar. And then now, once we've walked through all that, we're pretty much walking through the basics. We're going to pick our locations, we're going to pick our keyboard, our partitions, and then we're going to go through the installation process. Now, we're not actually going to look at the installation here. What I am going to do, though, is I'm going to boot into the system after I've installed it. Pretty much exactly the way I just showed you on that is how we're installing it. So we'll come back and show you what it's going to look like once it is installed. All right, so here we are. We've landed on the desktop here. So I did have to go in after the installation, log in the first time, sudo system control, enable LightDM, and then it's going to default to your Budgie desktop. We do have GNOME as well available to boot into because that is a dependent of Budgie. So go ahead and enter my super secret password. That's definitely not 123, and we will go ahead and log on into our system and show you what it looks like. I logged into this and I did not do anything else. So we'll get a chance to see what this kind of looks like right out of the box. We can change our desktop background here. Theming overall, Budgie theming isn't bad pretty much any time. We'll go ahead and poke around, see if there's any other theming we can do. You can see a variety of, not a lot of desktops, but just enough, I guess. Just enough to be fun. Let's go with, let's see what that one looks like. Let's go with that desktop for now. All right, so inside here, this is pretty much exactly the same way I had set it up here. We have our Audacities, there's books, Budgie desktop settings. We'll have a look at that just to have a brief look at it. But for the most part, we're going to see exactly what we told it to install. I don't have GIMP because for some reason it's not in the initial setup. I don't know why. We should just install it with Pac-Man though, so no big deal. There's our Thunderbird, Firefox, Chromium. Here's our LibreOffice. Programming stuff. We just have boxes in there. I went with Lollipop, VLC. Here's your system tools. Let's go ahead and have a look at the ArcoLinux tweak tool because this is probably something that we're not going to see inside of EndeavourOS. This is going to be one of the things that's going to set it aside, and I forgot exactly what it does. So we'll go ahead and poke around and look at it together. So here we have content of the auto start. So if you wanted to add anything to the auto start, you could do that. Here is your desktop installer. Okay, if you want to install more desktops, you can go ahead and install more desktops. It'll tell you if the desktop is not installed. So let's go over here. You can see it says this desktop is installed. So if you want to install another desktop, you can do that. And then you can select to clear cache before reinstall. So you can go ahead and install or reinstall it. So you can choose and install extra desktops very easily from the GUI. Here's some themes. Let's see, Grub themes. All right. So here's the ad blocker. So HBlock ad blocker. So go ahead and enable that guy there. And my guess is that's going to adjust some things to your hosts file. That's usually how the Linux ad blockers work. Of course, I will note here once again that if you are enabling DNS over HTTPS and the Firefox that Mozilla tries to force down your throat, a ad blocker that is based on your host file will no longer work. That is one of the reasons I do not support that system. Here's your auto login. You can set your auto logins, and then you can set your desktop settings here if you want to enable auto login to your setting. We have NeoFetch Editor. All right, so we have a variety of different things. Show disk, show users. We have Pac-Man configurations. You can enable your test repos. You can see the ones that are enabled. We can add custom repositories as well. Here's termite themes, theme switcher. If you are using i3 or Awesome, you can do that. And ZHS if you're using that. So that is actually a very nice tweak tool that we're not going to get inside of our other systems as well. Let's go ahead and have a look at our Budgie settings. I just want to have a brief look at what our options are as far as our themes are concerned. So here we have all of our basic general Budgie themes, which I think are nice, particularly since I'm not a huge fan of the more material design, but they actually are pretty nice when we're talking about material design themes. Not my favorite, but if I did have to go with material design, I do think that Budgie does it. Some of the better ones out there. There we are, notification positions. We have dark themes, built-in themes. So there we have it. Overall, system does work pretty nice. Let's go ahead and see what options we have as far as installing software. We might be stuck with, it looks like this one here, we have the GNOME Software Center, so that's good. Let's look up, for example, let's see if we can find, Brave's not in there. So I'm wondering if this is just giving me the applications that are installed. We might have to go ahead and refresh this. Let's have a look at our software repositories. Okay, so this is actually FlatHub is the only thing that is enabled right now. So I'd have to add the repositories for this, but it's pulling in Flatpaks is what it's pulling in. So, okay, if you want Flatpaks, I guess if you want anything else software related, you're probably going to have to install it with Pacman in the terminal. So that may or may not be your options, but that's kind of what we get. All right, so there is ArcoLinux. Let's go ahead next and have a look at our EndeavourOS. All right, so now we're going to boot up EndeavourOS, and we're going to have a look at what that installation looks like. So this one, as we said, is a lot faster, a lot easier. It's not as custom of a system, and it is going to get you an Arch system without you having to know a whole lot about what's going on or following all the scripts and online tutorials and such. All right, so we've landed on the desktop here, and we have, I think it's XFCE. Yeah, it looks like XFCE. And so we land on the desktop here, and we just have the option and start the installer to install it to the list. You have update the app. You can update the mirrors. So there's a lot of different things you can do inside of here. We'll just go ahead and click the installer. Now you have an online and an offline. So your offline is going to install it based upon your download right here. You're going to get the XFCE desktop. So pretty much the installation of what we have here. If you do the online method, you will have your desktop with vanilla theming and the internet connection is required. We are going to want to follow that process there. So you can kind of see it's going to start doing a bunch of stuff in the background. We have a ArcoLinux installer like we had in ArcoLinux. So go ahead and say American English. We're going to go next. New York, next, next. This one here, I might kill my disk here, but that's okay. I actually borrowed a VM that I didn't specifically need, just in case I had to do something. So here we can choose to erase the disk, have no swap with hibernation, or swap with no hibernation. So you can see it's going to format my disk. And now we're going to choose which desktop we want. So in this case here, I went with there. I think I left the base common development up there as well, which is going to give us pretty much the full Arch system. So I'm going to leave that one selected. And then I also went with Budgie, which is going to give us the exact same thing as we had in the previous set. Going through here, you can enter in your name and your password, and then when you click next, you're going to get a summary, and then you're going to go through and watch the installation process. That's the part that is fairly consistent. So what we're going to do, though, is we're going to log into a desktop here that I've already installed this, and we'll have a look at what it looks like from there. All right, so here we are. We have landed on our login manager here. We're going to go ahead and enter my super secret password. That's still definitely not 123. You see we have again the options Budgie, GNOME, and the various gnomes. So we're going to log into Budgie and hopefully see the same experience. Now this one here, I've actually have been working around with this one a little bit, so it's maybe not be exactly the way it was installed, but it should be pretty close. I did add a few extra packages, and one of the things I'm doing on this system here is I'm poking around with the next release candidate for LibreOffice 7. So there's a few things on here that are going to be kind of related to that. Now, the thing that you have on EndeavourOS that you don't have in ArcoLinux or other Linux is in the welcome screen you have a few options that I highlighted this in the recent video in more detail. I'll go ahead and just mention them briefly here, and I'll link to that video. We have the package cleanup configuration. This is going to clear out old package caches, which is actually a kind of an important thing to do. And you can set how frequently it cleans up and how many package versions to keep. So this is very good if you're needing to roll packages back or things like that. So that's an option that we have inside of Endeavour. The next thing that they have is they do have the application, which is AKM, which is the Arch Kernel Manager. So in this case here, I have installed the Arch Kernel Manager. It does not come pre-installed. You have to install it under the Add More Apps under the Welcome screen. And when you install this, then you're going to have the ability to add and remove various Linux kernels. Again, I cover this in more detail in the other video. The last thing is the Personal Commands tab. So you can add other tools. You might add cleanup scripts, other tools. You can add those to the welcome screen. So if there's some type of task you need to do, once a week or something, you can just go ahead and put it as a simple button on your screen. In this case, we have one that's going to launch the kernel manager. We have one that simply launches the text editor, and we have one that launches Firefox. These are all for testing purposes. So those are some of the things that you get inside of EndeavourOS. Other than that, though, it's pretty much is going to be a stock software. We do have, I think there's actually do have tools in here that are not flat packs. I don't know for sure, but let's go ahead and have a look. So here we are. So simple screen recorder. So this is coming from our repositories. So our EndeavourOS does actually have our repositories already set up and configured. Not sure if we have flat packs on this or not. Here's a thought. Why don't we, instead of searching for something, let's just look at, no, not update repositories. Let's view the repositories. All right, so we have the community repositories, core, EndeavourOS, extras. We do have FlatHub enabled here as well, multilib. So that's kind of, we do have a lot of your repositories already set up and configured. So we do have a GUI software manager. Like I said, because Endeavour is really designed to be an Arch system that's pretty close to ready to use out of the box. We're not going to have a whole lot of other options and settings. Again, we do have various theming settings that we can do. The theming is going to be pretty much the same because that's fairly consistent with your Budgie application. A lot of these come with it. You can add extra cursors. You can see that there's a lot more icons on ArcoLinux because we installed more versus other things. Out of the box, though, each of them are going to work pretty much the same once we get to this point. Your critical differences here is that you saw in the installer that EndeavourOS does not give you a lot of specific options. So your print servers are going to be set up. Your network servers are going to be set up. So if you need something more custom, you're going to want to run ArcoLinux to control those in fine detail. EndeavourOS, its task is to get you an easy-to-install Arch system that's ready to go. And if you use the offline version, you can even choose your desktop environment. We don't have a good GUI tool in here that's going to give you the easy ability to install the other desktop environments that I know of. But you can, of course, do that through Pacman in the terminal. If you're using Arch, you're going to need to use the terminal sometime soon anyway, so you may as well get used to it. Most of the other applications are going to be pretty much the same. We did have just a basic suite of applications, which were the common ones we might find. I did install a few other things. I think I did need to install LibreOffice on it, and I think I installed a couple other tools on here as well. So let's just go ahead and see if there's anything else here that's, there's parental controls, that's nice. And that's pretty much about it. So you can see that these two installers serve very different purposes. They are both excellent installers to get Arch on your system. So it boils down to this. If you want to learn more about Arch, you definitely want to use ArcoLinux. If you need to control the individual packages on your Linux system, you need to use ArcoLinux. Those are going to have a lot more control. It is a little bit more difficult to set up. Don't forget that command to enable your login manager, because for some reason it seems to be missing from the documentation, and it's not something that is quite as easy to do if you do not know what you're doing with it. Nevertheless, it's one line of code. It's not a big deal. Just figure it out. Sudo system control enable your window manager. Light DM, GDM, whatever. All right. Now, if you're needing an Arch system and you just need to get up and running quickly without spending a lot of extra time and what all is installed on the system is not necessarily of a consequence. EndeavourOS is absolutely the faster, the quicker option. It installs faster. It has few options to think about. It's going to land you on a very well configured desktop out of the box without any extra hassle. Now, is either one of those definitely better than the other? No, it completely depends on your application. If your application is to learn Linux, go with Arco. If your application is to use Linux for a real project and you need the bleeding edge, you definitely want to go with EndeavourOS. So there's your basic comparison between these two. Both excellent systems. I'd recommend both of them for sure. And that's kind of our thoughts. So let me know your thoughts on these two distributions in the comments down below. Thank you for watching this video from switchedtolinux. This channel would not be possible without the backing of the program supporters scrolling on the screen now. You can be a supporter at Patreon at patreon.com/TOMM or at thinklifemedia.com. I also want to thank the open source community who creates such excellent software that makes producing this show possible. Please remember to support your software communities. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.